Hi everyone, it's Shannon from Safe Space. Today we're going to be talking about emotion regulation. So as many parents know, when your kid gets dysregulated, it can be tricky to figure out what to do. Sometimes you do one thing and you think it's going to work and you're meaning well and you're trying to help them and it feels like it's making it worse. That's normal because when we understand what's actually happening for them, we can then figure out which strategy to use. So if you think about it as like a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being they're calm, 10 being their most dysregulated they've been, usually around a 6 or 7 is when they tip into kind of that survival pocket. That's when you're going to see that fight, flight, or freeze response because your body is feeling like it's in danger, even if there's no danger present. So what happens is when we have our emotions and they start to kind of bump up, our body is getting closer and closer and closer to that survival pocket. Once it tips into that, then you're going to see behaviors of like intense crying, running away, throwing things, hitting people, saying really mean things to you that they don't mean. And so what happens for them is when they get to that 6 or 7 and their body is thinking that they're in danger, their brain is going to shut off their prefrontal cortex, which is this part right at the front. It's that logic. So if you're going to have a conversation with them, that logic for them is offline. And that's why it doesn't work when you have a conversation with them. You're talking to, it seems like nobody, and your words are only intensifying probably those fight or flight, freeze behaviors. So when we know that that's offline, then we can kind of figure out what to do next. So when that goes offline, the reason why it does is it sends all that energy that runs the prefrontal cortex to your amygdala, which is your fight, flight, or freeze alarm. And so your kiddo can fight harder, run faster, hide better. So what we want to do is at that point in time, if they're at a 10, we just need to give them some space so that they can see for themselves that they're not in any danger. So less eye contact's better, giving them more space is a good thing. Once you give them that, then you can kind of move to the outward in strategy, which is on my page, where you're making an observation of something around them, being curious about it until they can start to kind of join you in that curiosity. Once that curiosity is there, then you know that the prefrontal cortex is starting to come back on. So don't jump right into the 4 steps of curiosity because they could easily jump right back up into that survival pocket. That's where those prefrontal cortex strategies are really good. Anything that's going to make them use that logic. So I wonder if Sonic or Spider-Man would win in a race. You're asking probably things about their interest. Once you can kind of get them talking about those things and you can see that they've kind of regulated and they're not showing those survival behaviors anymore, then you can go to the 4 steps of curiosity. So it's really important to know what's happening for your kiddo, knowing that when they're in the survival mode, they will say things that are pretty mean, but they're not really saying it to you. At that point in time, they're like fight, flight, or freeze. You kind of turn into that like primal bear. They just have to fight against it. Once you bring them down, that's usually when you're going to see them, be remorseful and feel probably upset that they maybe did some of those choices. And so that kind of leads me to the second part is when we can kind of figure out their escalation pattern, we can help them make better choices with practice. So what we're going to do is a lot of people say, well, my kid goes 0 to 10 so fast. And it looks like they do. But what you're seeing is they're going from 6 to 10 so fast because those behaviors are so in your face that you can't miss them. Usually there's a 0 to 6 behaviors that are more subtle. Maybe they get fidgety, maybe they can't sit still, maybe they pick up their fingers, maybe they start to get silly, maybe their voice goes up. So we're looking for those so we can start to catch those and then figure out some strategies to bump them down. So eventually your kiddo, with your help, will be able to see when they're at a 3, do a strategy to bump down so while they still have control, because once they tip into that survival pocket, they don't have that control anymore, and so that can feel really helpless for the kiddos because then the consequence is going to come next. So try it out, Look at the kiddos. All behavior is just their nervous system's way of communicating. If you're seeing those fight, flight, or freeze behaviors, your kiddo's body is not feeling safe at that moment, then we're trying to help them create that safety, use some skills to come down so that in life they can do that moving forward.